Hello, and thank you for taking time this weekend to join us here on KREM 2 News. I'm Cody Proctor, and this is the KREM 2 News Weekend Review. We know life gets busy, and it can be tough to keep up with all the news. So let's get you updated on some of the headlines from this past week.
A day after the state Senate passed a bill to tax Washingtonians who make more than $1 million in income at a rate of 9.9%, Governor Bob Ferguson weighed in.
I've said multiple times that any bill I sign must send a significant percentage of the revenue back to Washington families and small business owners. We are not there yet, and we are still not close to being there.
Ferguson says the Millionaires Tax would impact 0.5% of Washingtonians. It would generate more than $3 billion a year in revenue, and Tuesday, the governor laid out where he wants that money to go.
We should use $1 billion of this new revenue to give small business owners a significant, that's an understatement, tax break.
He said he wants to eliminate or reduce the business and occupation tax for thousands of small businesses across the state. He also said he wants to expand the working families tax credit so it applies to significantly more families.
So we must dramatically expand both how many working families qualify and the amount of money that they receive. And I need to see both of those things for any bill that I'd be signing.
Ferguson also proposed eliminating sales tax on certain items, including hygiene products and diapers. And he proposed implementing a sales tax holiday, something several other states do that would impact all Washingtonians.
My proposal includes 2 sales tax holidays, one 3-day weekend, one 2-day holiday. During that time, there'd be no sales tax on items less than $1,000.
Opponents say they fear that tax threshold eventually would be lowered below the $1 million mark. When asked about that, Ferguson had this to say.
My position is clear, that the Millionaires Tax should only apply to folks who make that $1 million. I've also said there needs to be essentially an inflation index, so that amount goes up every single year. So it doesn't essentially folks don't essentially come up to it eventually. So I've been crystal clear on that, that's what I support.
That sound could cost you more, but would it change what you buy? We looked at what happened in cities that have already tried it.
Soda taxes aren't new. Since 2015, 8 U.S. cities, including Seattle, have rolled out their own version. So what happened? A 2024 study from the University of Washington looked at buying habits in cities like Seattle, San Francisco, and Philadelphia. Researchers tracked nearly 400 households after those taxes took effect. They found lower-income households cut their sweetened beverage purchases by nearly 50%. Higher-income households reduced purchases by about 18%. UW researchers say because lower-income families tend to consume sugary drinks at higher rates, that drop could help reduce health disparities over time. Here in Spokane County, the stakes are real. Diabetes ranked as the 8th leading cause of death in 2022. About 10% of Spokane County adults are living with it, the same rate for the state. And roughly a third of adults and nearly 30% of youth are categorized as overweight or obese. Supporters of the proposed tax say that's exactly why this proposal matters. They argue fewer sugary drinks could mean better long-term health, while the tax revenue could also support food security programs. The proposal is still early in the process, but the research gives us a preview of what could happen if it passes. Amanda Rowley, KREM 2 News.
This was the main shot, and it missed.
The Idaho Supreme Court ruled last week that the state's parental choice tax credit program does not violate the state's constitution.
I think this is a pretty definitive decision.
The program sets aside $50 million in public funds annually for tax credits that Idaho families can use on private school expenses, including tuition. In the court's opinion, the justices noted that the challengers' claims of harm were hypothetical and speculative, meaning they couldn't prove the tax credit program would actually hurt public schools.
This decision illustrates why there just aren't very many good arguments, or really any good arguments, legal arguments against school choice.
Tom Fisher is the litigation director at EdChoice, a national advocacy group for school choice. He hopes Idaho's ruling can be an example for other states facing the same legal battle.
Public schools are terrific for many families, and they do a great job for many families. But for others, there is a need to do something different to make sure that every child has a chance at a high-quality education that's appropriate for them.
But as Idaho faces a projected $40 million budget deficit this year and a projected $500 million for fiscal year 2027, some wonder whether this could end up back in court if the budget for public schools gets touched to help bridge the state's funding gap.
I don't think the evidence will ever bear that out.
The program is free to go ahead.
Stephanie Witt is a public service professor at Boise State.
We are seeing a legislature that appears really committed to this idea, even with the $50 million plus price tag in a season where we're making cuts in other state agencies.
She says it's hard to argue the credits specifically are taking from public schools when other major agencies draw from the same pot, the state's general fund.
I don't know how you make that argument exactly, because you have all the slices of the pie that take a lot of money, right? Corrections has a slice, Medicaid has a big slice, transportation.
A question the state has faced several times before, including a 2005 Idaho Supreme Court ruling that the state was not fulfilling its duty.
We've never had a conclusive end to that discussion.
But Fisher says he's not worried about a future legal challenge based on real-world budget harm.
The argument about the budget for public schools in Idaho is just that. It's about the budget for public schools. And if the legislature somehow doesn't do what it's supposed to do in that regard, that's a separate question.
As we go to break, here's a check of your weekend forecast. Welcome back to the KREM 2 News Week in Review. Before we get back to this week's headlines, we want to remind you, you can get the latest news and weather forecast anytime you want on KREM 2 Plus. It's our streaming app you can watch on your TV, and best of all, it's free. We hope you'll check it out, but now let's get back to the Week in Review.
The water pushed so hard it broke the door.
On Tuesday morning, a car crashed into a power pole and fire hydrant near West Rowan Avenue and Fleming in Spokane. It knocked out power for 300 people in the area, and water from the hydrant flooded the Morningstar Baptist Church basement, where the nonprofit Jules Helping Hands stores blankets and comforters for 3 of their 5 scattered site shelters. The nonprofit's founder, Julie Garcia, says church staff and neighbors sprang into action.
It was really amazing. There was a lot of neighbors outside, all helping the emergency workers. There were city workers, there were police, there were fire. Everybody was very helpful and kind.
The church's parking lot flooded as well, damaging the fire alarm and exit.
We're going to have to end up replacing the fire door also, because I can hear it clicking.
Walter Kendricks is the pastor for Morningstar. He says the church will be able to continue services and the shelter, and some of who they serve, he says, tried to help them when the water started pouring in.
Some of our guests were outside trying to keep the water from coming in. They were digging holes in the ground so the water could perhaps seep into that.
Garcia says Jules will be hosting donation drives at all of their shelters starting Wednesday, emphasizing a need for blankets, twin bed sheets, and comforters. She adds since the flooding happened, folks have been especially kind in donating what they can.
It is really beautiful to see the community come together. This is a way for people to be able to help in a safe way.
An unpredictable problem in the process of getting solved. As Kendricks looks at the work ahead, knowing nobody will be displaced, he says sometimes faith means finding a reason to laugh.
It ran downhill, it just...
in the middle of a mess.
You have to, it's funny, you have to laugh.
Connor McAvoy, KREM 2 News.
On the corner of Haven and Wellesley in Hilliard is the future location of an affordable child care center that will offer space up to 100 children The goal to offer more flexible childcare hours for Spokane's working families.
Spokane's Northeast Community Center report that 85% of people say they would be able to work more or find a better job if they had the right childcare.
Those goals of our residents change to help us get better employment, help us with economic mobility.
With this new child care facility, there will also be up to 37 workforce housing units. I am told child care tuition and housing units will be offered below market rate. Why Hilliard? Local officials and business leaders say there is an increasing workforce in Hilliard who need flexible child care hours like nights and weekends.
Biggest barriers we hear from potential employees and people in this area, especially for those off-shift roles, is childcare.
Companies like Jubilant Hollister Steer, which employs about 1,000 people, say flexible childcare is critical to keeping and growing employees.
If parents can't find that safe, reliable, affordable care, they can't take the next step in their careers.
How can you make an investment in a community that then allows it to grow economically? So this is great that it's childcare.
One local parent says this will open up countless doors for her family.
And I have kids with special needs, and so this community center opens up so many doors for me. It opens up so many doors for fellow parents that I know that, not only have children with special needs that are like, oh, I don't know if my kid's, the daycare is going to call me in 5 minutes and say, hey, we can't do this.
Officials say they're hoping to break ground later this fall with an opening date in 2028. I'm reporting in Hilliard. Regan Gallo, KREM 2 News.
Thank you for watching the KREM 2 News Week in Review. I'm Cody Proctor. It's been a busy week all across the Inland Northwest, so let's help catch you up on some stories you might have missed.
Double-decker buses are returning to Spokane streets, this time with some new and improved safety measures. After a double-decker bus crashed into a viaduct in downtown Spokane last month, STA is working to restore confidence in both drivers and passengers.
We're also offering driver refamiliarization so that any of the operators who want some additional comfort in driving those buses before they go back into the service will offer that.
Some of the new safety features STA is testing this week are safety stops at viaducts, similar to how buses are required to stop at railroad crossings. They're also implementing new technology in the buses that mandates additional communication with dispatch to verify the operation and height of the bus in downtown Spokane. STA will be testing these features for a couple of days along routes 6 and 66 between Spokane and Cheney, with the goal to return them to service by the end of the month.
We've gotten really good reception since we introduced the double-decker buses last fall. The community of Cheney welcomed them in a parade. We did a golden ticket hunt for customers who wanted to be the first on the bus. So we know that there's a lot of community appreciation and they see a lot of value in this.
STA is also putting all drivers through additional training and wants to reassure riders who are worried or skeptical that safety is always a priority.
What happened was extremely unfortunate, but it was an isolated incident, and we hope that the public recognizes that we keep their safety first and we welcome them aboard the double-deckers later this month.
Reporting in downtown Spokane, Caitlin Galloway, KREM 2 News.
Well, since 1909, Adams Elementary School stood on Regal Street. Today marks Demolition Day and a start to a new chapter for the school.
Dirt, dust, and rubble cover the ground of Adams Elementary School.
It is a part of Adams Elementary.
Kindergartner Amelia Fisher received a brick from construction crews as a keepsake. She says her favorite memory at Adams was art.
In art, I loved making the baby penguins.
In November 2025, Spokane voters approved the district bond with 61.8% support, paving the way for a brand new Adams Elementary and other district projects.
Wish people could have came and experienced the stairs, the inaccessibility, the heating problems, and the sewage problems.
Parent-teacher group president Jessica Morris tells me it's sad to see the school go, but she says she's excited for what a new school will bring.
Our kids do deserve a school to feel good about themselves and coming to school wanting to learn.
And as construction crews even spooked me with big booms.
Yeah.
Others watching beside me reflected on the memories made, like one woman who had 3 generations attend Adams.
I'm like, wow, I used to work in there. Like watching them tear down the wall, I'm like, that is where the sink and the dishwasher was. It's kind of like, I guess I would say, a beginning to a new start.
Spokane Public Schools says there will be a groundbreaking for the construction of the new school sometime in February or in March. For now, I'm reporting on the South Hill, Regan Gallo, KREM 2 News.
The issue of PFAS contaminated water in the West Plains area is one that has been happening for years. Progress to fix the problem has been slow, but a new order from the Washington State Department of Ecology could help move things forward. On this cloudy and rainy day, John Hancock's home north of Airway Heights is a quiet spot with a beautiful view of the creek below. But his properties also brought some heartaches when it comes to PFAS, also known as forever chemicals.
First test I had was clean, so there were neighbors with trouble, but not me. So it didn't feel like a problem that I had to worry about.
That wouldn't be the case for long.
And what has happened since then is the legal limit has gone down from 70 to 18. So at 70 parts per trillion, my water was safe, but at 18, it's not.
Now Hancock serves as the president of the West Plains Water Coalition. PFAS-contaminated water has been an issue in the West Plains area since 2017, stemming from firefighting foam used at both Fairchild Air Force Base and at the Spokane International Airport. These forever chemicals can bring the potential for harmful health conditions. Last week, the Washington Department of Ecology sent an emergency order to the airport, the city of Spokane, and Spokane County to come up with a draft for a short-term interim action plan. That plan's due next week and needs to line out how they plan to provide bottled water or filters to people with contaminated private wells throughout the affected area, as well as offer testing. During a joint meeting last Thursday with the city and county, the Spokane Airport Board touched on the new order, saying it was too early to give an update at the time. For Hancock, this new development feels like the coalition's work is paying off.
After 4 years of hard progress towards explaining the story, meeting with neighbors, hearing their stories, meeting with agencies, meeting with the electeds to just try to get attention to the severity of the health risk from PFAS.
The Department of Ecology is also requiring them to come up with a long-term interim action plan that's due in early May. The Department of Ecology plans to hold a public meeting on February 25th. It'll be a Wednesday at 6 p.m. at Shriners Event Center. In Spokane County, Cody Proctor, KREM 2 News. Before we wrap up this edition of the KREM 2 News Week in Review, we have one more story you might have missed this past week. Even though this winter has been rather dismal so far, Spokane City officials say staff are still staying busy, even without snow removal.
It's good to know the city's plan to remove snow and keep streets safe. And that plan includes 3 heavy hitters. That was our report back in October. But those heavy hitters stayed mostly parked this winter season thanks to Mother Nature.
This is definitely a very mild winter with very little snow accumulation.
The lack of snow means changes. According to Public Works spokesperson Kirsten Davis, staff are still on their 20-hour daily staffing schedule. But instead of plowing, they're doing other things like street sweeping, leaf pickup, and maintaining equipment.
When we don't have snow on years like this, there's a lot of things we still need to do. And people need to remember that we're still de-icing a lot. We still have, some slick roadways if there's, frost or some minor precipitation.
Speaking of de-icing, not as much is being used. Davis says the city's only used about 83,000 gallons of liquid de-icer since October, about 7% of their average. They've also used about 2,500 tons of solid material like sand and granular de-icer. That's about 82% of their average.
We built an additional storage shed at our streets department that will hold more material, and so we can keep it longer throughout the year. So that basically will just be stockpiled there as we move into next year.
Now, as for their snow removal budget, Davis says that's harder to track since their winter operations straddle 2 budget years. She says costs can fluctuate from year to year.
The bottom line is we're going to get the streets plowed if necessary.
Now, of course, winter is not over yet. We're only into the second half of February, and according to the city, their winter operation season runs until March 15th. In Spokane, Cody Proctor, KREM 2 News. Thank you for joining us for the KREM 2 News Week in Review. Be sure to keep it here for more news and weather updates throughout the weekend. I'm Cody Proctor. Thanks for watching.